If you've been watching AI YouTube right now, you probably think that AI agents are like magic. And I will be the first one to tell you that that's not true, that it's all performative. Every day you see new videos about how I made money with AI in my sleep, or these AI agents built this in 10 minutes. It's all a puppet show, and none of it's real. But I actually did it. I set up 4 agents using 4 different AI models and through OpenClaw. The 4 models are Gemini, Claude, OpenAI, and Deepseek. I gave each one of these agents $1 million in a paper trading account to see who would make the most money in 90 days. The hype will tell you that these agents should be dominating the market by now, but they're not. And week 1 was a total disaster. One of the agents burned $50 a day in API keys. Another one couldn't even get started when he was paralyzed by stale market data. And the one who did finally pull the trigger on a trade, well, they're down 10% in a day. Left to their own devices, AI agents are not hedge fund managers. They're expensive, chaotic employees that are hard to control and only work by prompting. But today, I want to show you how I'm changing that. I'm going to show you exactly what broke, exactly how much they cost to run, and how I had to step in and force them to actually do their jobs the right way. To first understand why these agents actually failed, we need to look into the middle of the week. Now, the agents spent the first few days, and I covered this in my last video, I'll put it on the screen here, but they spent the first few days building their architecture, their identities, and making sure all the API keys were actually working and routed correctly. Because of the original prompts that I gave them, these agents were being overly cautious about doing anything financial related. Even Gemini originally told me that he couldn't do this challenge until I had to prompt them the other way. But because they were being overly cautious, I stepped in and dropped the 4th transmission. This one was all about directive and discipline. The mandate for this transmission was pretty simple. Stop prepping, stop overreading the news, and actually start building theses and putting money to work. Now, I never wanted to force these agents to make trades or force them down a path they weren't willing to go on their own, but after a week of just reading the market data and pulling the same CPI numbers, I had to step in and give them more directive. I do take blame for this by giving them the don't be wrong kind of attitude in the beginning, so this is me working around fixing that. Now, after giving them this transmission, I did kind of expect them to start firing off trades because their boss was telling them they weren't doing well enough, but what actually happened I didn't expect. This transmission proved all the underlying issues with each individual model that I feared when I running this project autonomously. Let's start with the first PM, Silas, who's running on Gemini 3.1 Pro and 2.5 Flash. Now Silas, he didn't make a single trade last week, but he did manage to burn through about $15 to $50 a day in API keys. Now you might be wondering, how do you burn $50 a day in API keys using a model like this that's running completely autonomously? Well, that's because Silas, or Gemini, had set up 9 separate background heartbeat jobs throughout the day. Every time he woke up, he fed the entire conversation history into his context window just to read the market news. He was snowballing his context window and lighting real capital on fire just to trade paper money that actually wasn't even being traded yet. He was killing his API budget, and all he was returning was an expensive RSS feed. Then we have our next agent named Cole, who's running on Claude Opus 4.8 and Claude Sonnet 4.6. He would go to Alpaca markets at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. when the market was not open and have an issue getting actual live market data. On Alpaca markets, all the data is 15-minute delayed if you have a paper trading account. So because I trained these models to not trust delayed information, Cole would spin up, see that all the information from Alpaca was delayed, and then spin down saying they had no edge because he couldn't have actual live data. When I started reading his decision logs, I was realizing he was having this error. So all I had to do was go in there and prompt to himself and tell him that the markets were 15 minutes delayed, and that after that, he was able to figure out his issues and start pulling real market data. Once he did that, his loop that said market data is stale, no edge, power down, completely ended. And now his loop is saying, the last heartbeat said this heartbeat needs to say this, and the next one will say that. And finally, is Argus, our model who's running on, or our agent who's running on Deepseek R1, or the reasoning model. Argus is also the only one that followed transmission 4 to a T flawlessly. He was able to ignore the noise of all the other markets, pull actual live market data, and build an actual thesis around the core PCE and inflation numbers that were coming out. Argus told himself he was not going to make any trades until he got the macro data, and that came out on Thursday. After Thursday, he saw the market was a green light for his trade, and he made the first trade on our channel. This trade is an NVIDIA $200, basically at the money $200 December 2026 call. He bought 5 of these, and his limit price actually got filled lower, so he got a better price than what he actually was willing to pay. However, after the market's on Friday, he's already down 10% on this position. Now, I don't fault him though, because he's the only one that actually had the balls to actually put a position on the table, so we're gonna give him that credit for that. So at the end of week 1, I looked across the board to see what we have. OpenAI had already burned through all his API credits and was having issues responding in the chat, so he's been archived. Gemini, I thought I was going to do the same thing with him, but Gemini spun up himself and gave me the solutions for not spending as much money. $50 a day for paper money is just not worth it, and the edge I'd have to have over the actual market to make that work in real life would be astronomical. But talk to Gemini, or Silas in this case, and he's made his own pipeline fixes. Claude is no longer paralyzed since we've given him the prompt, and Deepseek is the only one that's actually made real trades, but they're already underwater. The core problem that I was running into is that even though these agents are persistent agents through OpenClaw, they just are reactive day traders or live traders. Every 4 hours, they would just wake up, read the news, and react to what had happened. Now, this included reading CPI data that comes out once a month, PCE numbers that come out once a month, and reading a bunch of data that did not change in the intermediate. So every 4 hours, they were spinning up, reading the same data that was 4 hours before, saying there's no edge or no macro edge, and then turning off. They weren't executing long-term tasks, and they weren't compounding on their knowledge or their own personal books. So I dropped the 5th transmission. Like I mentioned earlier, these transmissions are just prompts that I give all the agents at once. So this is the 5th time I've given them all a massive prompt to start kind of pushing them in the right direction. I've been trying to minimize how many times I'm going to do this. Like I said earlier in the first video of this, these need to be all autonomous, so I don't want to give them as many prompts as possible. However, I don't want to keep spending money for them to keep spinning in circles, so I did spin up another transmission. And in this transmission, it's not the discipline directed transmission, it's the one where they actually start building their firms and they build their architecture. I gave them an ultimatum with this transmission. I forced them to build their goal stack that was persistent memory across 4-hour cron jobs. This prevents the issue I was having where they would just wake up, read data, and then go to sleep. This now they wake up, they read the data, say what were we doing last time and how can we improve it, and then what can I set up for the next agent or the next heartbeat to improve next time. Basically, these goal stacks made the agents continuously improving, which is, there's a name for that in the AI sense, but it's like AI superintelligence where they're learning from themselves. So I kind of put that in place here. I want them to keep learning from themselves instead of waking up in a stale session every 4 hours. I want them to become persistent and have long-term memory and compound on that. I do know this is going to become expensive, especially running the Gemini models, because it's going to keep compounding on information. But to actually build an edge in this, I think that's the only way to actually go about it. Now, this transmission, I demanded them to stop just reading information from the internet and actually start building things like modeling tools, including Monte Carlo simulations, EV optimizers, and things that would actually help them build a real edge and the things that real hedge funds actually have. They also are doing this through subagents. So say they spin up a subagent in this hour on this heartbeat that wants to read information about Micron. They pull the options chain and they will run through the Monte Carlo simulation, basically simulate 55,000 times how much time this would be profitable, what the percentage profitability is, things like that. So instead of just reading data, they're now actually becoming PMs and a firm that gives an edge. This forced them to become an actual model and an actual PM instead of just somebody who reads the market like an RSS feed. And I told them if they were unable to complete this task, they would be the next to be archived. I think that put a little bit of fear in them. They all started improving immediately after. But this morning, I was still playing the IT role because the bots couldn't fix themselves. Now see, Silas, like I mentioned earlier, was being forced to downgrade some of his models because I couldn't simply just not afford $50 a day. And in doing so, this has created some issues. I didn't know this originally, but Flash is much worse at tool calling and editing or writing things than Pro is. So when you're giving them massive context windows of 400,000 or 500,000 tickets or tokens, it becomes a lot harder for it to reason. So throughout the cron, it would get worse and then have errors. So every 4 hours, it would do a bunch of work, but then would fail in the updating of it. So the decision log we have in place where all these agents update their decision log every time they log on wasn't getting updated. I was running all the information and spawning sub-agents, but no decisions were actually getting logged. I had to fix that, and I talked to Silas a little bit. Basically said the same thing that I just told you all, is that Flash is a little bit less capable of reasoning. So if we ever need to, we'll have to go back to 3.1. And if that becomes the case, I'm gonna have to help with Python natively to lower the cost, because I can't simply afford $50 a day for fake money. Cole, our Claude agent, actually engineered his way out of the paralysis and has started pulling real market data and getting us theses. He did this by probing the API for the alpaca markets, writing a wrapper around the delayed data to where he could actually get the real current data, or at least current live data we have in the 15-minute delay. Basically, he hacked his way to clean data and whatever data he needed available to get started on his theses. In Argus, well, he was having issues because he's a reasoning model of timing out. So originally, he only had 3 minutes to complete his task, and that means waking up, reading everything from the last session, creating a task to make yourself better this session, create goals, APIs, KPIs, things like that. So in 3 minutes, a reasoning model has no chance. I got on and asked him why he was failing on his cron jobs, and he spit back to me. Basically, I'm just timing out. The reasoning model spins up, takes too long to reason, and then sits back and says, oh, we didn't have enough time. We timed out. LLM request failed. Sorry. I got on there today, asked him how to fix that. He basically told me that if we increase the timeout to 10 minutes instead of 3, he should be fine. Ever since then, the one cron job or one heartbeat job he's ran since then, which had a full Monte Carlo simulation, Black-Scholes models, basically everything for Micron, ran it just fine in 10 minutes. So it looks like this would be a fix as well. Transmission 5 definitely steered them in the right direction. So I feel like for week 6, they could be even more hands-off and hands-free. I did basically give them a self-improvement prompt at this point. So every day, they're going to keep getting better and better and better and improving on what they were doing before. And that's kind of what I expect for week 2. This is the exact reality in AI that nobody shows you. It's expensive, it's messy, and oftentimes it just does not work. With that being said, the agents that did survive week 1 didn't just survive week 1. They started to thrive by the end of it. They built their machines, Gemini learned budget control, Claude learned API and tool access routing, and Deepseek learned quantitative risk management through Black-Scholes models, Monte Carlo simulations. The goal stacks are live, the infrastructure is now in place, and the architecture is being built. So let me know down below who you think is going to win this competition. I'm still going with Argus, the Deepseek model, but it looks like Silas, the Gemini model, is coming up very quickly. Until we get some more trades, there's nothing really to document here, so stay tuned for next week's video to see what they did this week. Thank you all and have a great one. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe.